In this video, I want to continue covering React Router and focusing a little bit more on this snippet. In particular, I want to take a look at some of the different properties that we passed off to both these route components. Both route components got a path property. This property right here is what is used by React Router to decide whether or not to show this given route component on the screen. On the first route, we then had the keyword exact. We'll talk about what exact does in just a moment. The last prop on here of component does exactly what you would think it does. When we pass in the component, if this route right here is matched by the given URL that the user is visiting, we're going to show either page 1 or page 2. Now, something I want you to be aware of is that in a React Router application, different routes can be matched by the same URL. Let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to take the first route right here, and I'm going to duplicate it right above itself. So I now have two identical routes inside of my application. I'll then save this file, and then flip on over to the browser. I'll then go up to my URL bar, and I'll make sure that I navigate back to localhost 3000. And then when I get there, I see page 1 appear on the screen twice. So inside of a React Router application, we can very easily have multiple route components that match a given URL and all show themselves to the user. Now this is absolutely by design, because there are some cases where we will define different route components deeply nested inside of different components inside of our application. And so by deeply nesting routes, we can customize how some part of our app looks depending upon the URL. And we don't have to pass down some deep configuration through Redux or props or something like that to configure how a very deeply nested child component renders itself. Okay, I'm going to delete that duplicated route. Now I want to tell you a little bit more about what that exact keyword means. So like I said just a second ago, a single route, or excuse me, a single URL or a single path can be matched by different routes inside of our application. Now let's try taking off that exact keyword right there, and you're going to see some really interesting behavior. All right, I'm going to save this file, and then I'll flip back over to my application. Now I'm still at localhost 3000, and I see the text page 1 appear on the screen. Now I'm going to navigate to page 2, and you're going to start to see something kind of interesting. So when I go over to page 2, I see both the route for page 1 and page 2 rendered on the screen. So this might be a little bit surprising. And I know it definitely is surprising to me. I very frequently run into this and just knock my head against the wall with React Router because of this little issue right here. So you might have thought that because we went to /page2, we would only show the second route on the screen, but that is not the case with React Router. You see this path property right here has some very interesting behavior that is kind of hard to understand at first glance. So to help you understand why we saw both routes appear on the screen when we went to /page2, I want to show you a couple of diagrams to help you understand exactly what the path property does for us. Okay, so in this diagram right here, I have some address that we put into our address bar. Now, as we've discussed, React Router only cares about what is listed after the .com or the .net or the .edu or the port definition, whatever it is inside of your URL. So in this case, React Router would just care about the path of /. So now using this path right here, I want to figure out what different route definitions would be shown inside of our application. In this case, we would only be showing the first route definition, the one with a path of just /. We would not show path of /page or path of /page/5. The rule that we use for deciding what components or what routes are going to be shown on the screen is this little snippet of code right here. So this is not the exact code that React Router internally runs, but it kind of works like 90% of the time for figuring out what is going on. So essentially, we take the string of the extracted path from the URL, and we can imagine that we'd run the contains method with the path inside of each of our different route components. Now, just so you know, the contains method is going to essentially check if this string exists inside of this string. So in this case, we would ask ourselves, okay, does this string contain the path / or contain the string /? In this case, it does. So this route would be visible on the screen, and we would see it appear when we loaded our application. And then we would move on to the next route, and we would say, okay, does this path right here or this string contain the string /page? In this case, no. So we would not show this route. And then the same thing with this third route down here as well. Now let's continue on to another quick example here. Now on this one, I kind of abbreviated it just a little bit to make this go a little bit faster. So let's imagine that we go to localhost 3000 /page. So now our extracted path is /page. So now we would say, does this string right here contain this path? Well, in this case, it does, because we have / here and we have the / right there. So this string contains that string, and so we would show that route component on the screen. We would then move on to the next route, and we would say, does this string contain that string? And in this case, it does. /page matches perfectly with /page. And then we would move on to our last route. So /page, does that contain the string /page/5? In this case, no, it does not, so we would not show that route. And then finally, if we went to localhost 3000 /page/5, I bet you can imagine, yep, this route right here, or this string, contains that string, it contains that string, and it contains that string. So this right here is the rule that React Router uses to decide whether or not to show a given route on the screen. And it explains why we see both of these routes appear. So we navigated to a route of /page2. So we would say, does /page2 contain the character /? Yes, it does. So this route is rendered on the screen. We would then move on to the next route, and we would say, does /page2 contain the string /page2? Yes, it does. Okay, then this route is displayed on the screen as well. So that is the rule that React Router uses. Now you might be thinking to yourself, that sounds like a crazy town rule. Like, why does it do that? Well, you're going to see that inside of React Router, there are sometimes some rules that are sometimes a little bit confusing or not quite what you would expect. I will say that the authors of React Router do everything that they do for a very good reason. So there are some good reasons that you would want to have some routes that kind of eagerly match themselves in this fashion, but I just want you to know that sometimes this behavior is going to be a little bit unexpected. Now, in order to override this behavior, we can find all of our given routes, and we can optionally add on a prop of exact, like so. Just so you know, when we type out a keyword inside of a JSX tag like so, it is equivalent to saying equals true. So anytime that you list out just a property name, the component that you add it to interprets that as having a prop equal to true. So inside of the route component, it would think that this.props.exact would equal the value true. So that's what happens when you just put the keyword like that by itself. When you add on a prop name of exact, it causes React Router to change the rule that it uses for matching the path slightly. And as you would expect, it essentially changes it to, does extracted path equal the string path, which is way closer to how a lot of people probably imagine this system would or should work. So now with the exact keyword on there, we would say, does the route of /page2 exactly equal the string /? Well, no, it doesn't. So we would now not show that route component on the screen. However, does /page2 contain /page2? Yes, it still does. So we would show that route component on the screen. Now, last thing I want you to understand is that when we add on this exact keyword, it only modifies the route that you add it to. So if we had a second route right here with a path of / that does not have the exact keyword, then this one right here would be shown on the screen whenever the user goes to /page2. And so if I say save that, you see that I see page 1 appear again. Okay, so now that we have a better idea of how React Router works internally and how it matches this path in this kind of confusing fashion, let's continue with our application in the next video.